June Kim opened his eyes slowly. His head hurt. Where was he? The last thing he remembered was piloting his small ship near the edge of the Andromeda sector. There had been a flash of light, then nothing. He sat up and looked around. He was in a room with glass walls. The floor was soft and white. There was a bed, a table, and what looked like a bathroom area in the corner. It was like a nice apartment, except for the glass walls. "Hello," June called out. His voice seemed to hit the glass and come back to him. No one answered. He stood up carefully. His legs felt weak. He walked to the glass and placed his hand against it. It was cool and very solid. He pushed harder. It didn't move at all. Beyond the glass, he could see a large room with strange furniture. The ceiling was much higher than any room he had seen before. Everything looked clean and shiny, but odd. Not made for humans. A door slid open on the far side of the room. June stepped back from the glass in shock. A tall figure entered. It was at least 8 feet tall with skin that shimmered like an oil slick in sunlight. It had 6 eyes arranged in a circle on its face. Its body was thin but strong-looking, with 4 long arms. It was female. June could tell somehow. She moved with grace as she approached his glass cage. She wore something like a uniform, white with blue markings. "Subject is awake," she said. Her voice came through some kind of speaker. It was high and musical. June backed away until he hit the opposite wall. "Who are you? Why am I here?" The alien tilted her head, studying him. Then she pressed something on her wrist. A screen appeared in the air in front of her. She spoke again, but in a different language. Clicks and whistles mixed with words. Something in June's head tingled. His military neural implant was working to translate. After a few seconds, he could understand her. Specimen shows expected fear response. Vocal patterns consistent with previous human subjects. She was talking about him like he was an animal. June felt anger rise in his chest. "I am not a specimen," he shouted. "I am Captain June Kim of the Earth Exploration Fleet." The alien didn't react to his words. She just made more notes on her floating screen. June realized she couldn't understand him. Or maybe she just didn't care what he said. The alien pressed another button on her wrist. A small part of the glass wall slid open. A tray with food and water slid through. Then the opening closed quickly. "Nutrition provided as scheduled," she said. "Will return for observation period in 6 units." She turned and walked out of the room, the door sliding shut behind her. June sat on the edge of the bed. He needed to think. He was clearly a captive, some kind of zoo animal or lab rat to these aliens. But who were they? And what did they want from him? He looked at the food tray. There was something like bread, some purple fruit, and a cup of clear liquid. His stomach growled. How long had he been unconscious? As he ate, June noticed a small mark on the glass, writing in the alien language. His implant translated it slowly. Human male. Captured. Sector 7. Owner. Senior researcher Nara of House Kwan. Owner. The word made him feel sick. This Nara thought she owned him. June finished eating and walked around his cage. He needed to learn more. The implant in his head was military grade. It could do more than just translate, if he could access the alien systems somehow. He looked out through the glass again. There was another glass cage on the far side of the room. He squinted to see better. There was someone inside. Another human. June's heart beat faster. He was not alone. And if there were 2 of them, there might be more. More humans meant more chances to escape. He sat back on the bed and closed his eyes. He would play along for now. Watch. Learn. Wait. And when the time was right, Nara of House Kwan would learn that humans were not pets to be caged. Nara returned to her laboratory the next day. She stood tall and proud as she walked to the center of the room. Her 6 eyes blinked in sequence as she looked at her notes on the floating screen. "Begin recording," she said. "Day 12 of human specimen observation. Subject shows normal adaptation to captivity." She walked closer to June's glass cage. June was sitting on the floor, watching her. He had spent the night thinking and planning. His military training had taught him to stay calm in dangerous situations. "Today I will begin basic communication tests," Nara said. She pressed a button on her wrist device. A picture appeared on the inside wall of June's cage. It was a simple image of food. Nara pointed to it and said, "Food." June understood perfectly thanks to his implant, but he decided to play dumb. He looked confused and tilted his head. Nara repeated the word slowly. "Food." She pointed to the tray from yesterday. "Food." June nodded slowly, pretending to just understand. "Food," he repeated. Nara's skin rippled with color, a sign of pleasure. "Good," she said. Subject learns quickly compared to other specimens. She showed more pictures: water, sleep, bathroom. Each time, June pretended to slowly learn the words. "Exceptional response rate," Nara noted on her screen. "This confirms my theory that humans have higher learning potential than the Science Council believes." June filed this information away. There was a Science Council. They had opinions about humans, and Nara seemed to think differently than they did. When Nara finished the lesson, she pressed another button. The glass wall slid open slightly. She placed a small device on the floor of the cage. "A reward for good behavior," she said. The wall closed again. After she left, June examined the device. It was a simple entertainment unit. It showed moving pictures, animals from Earth. Nara thought he would enjoy seeing familiar creatures. June smiled. This was useful. The device might have parts he could use, but more importantly, it showed that Nara wanted to make him happy. That was a weakness he could use. Later that day, June heard voices. Nara returned with another alien. This one was shorter with darker skin. The new alien looked at June with what seemed like disgust. "I do not understand your interest in these creatures, Nara," the new alien said. "They are primitive, barely intelligent." "You are wrong, Dr. Min," Nara replied. "This specimen shows remarkable intelligence. Watch this." She activated the picture system again. This time she showed new images, shapes, and colors. June quickly matched them when she asked, pretending it was a little difficult, but managing to get them right. "See," Nara said proudly. "He learned 20 basic words yesterday. Today he understands matching concepts." Dr. Min made a dismissive gesture with one of his 4 arms. "Party tricks." The Lumari specimens could do the same. "The Lumari took 4 times as long to learn," Nara argued. "These humans are special." "You are too attached to your specimens, Nara," Dr. Min said. "Remember what happened to researcher Ta. He became fond of his specimens and lost his scientific view. Now he works in the food production sector." Nara's skin darkened. "I maintain proper scientific distance. My interest is purely academic." After Dr. Min left, Nara looked at June for a long time. Her eyes seemed to study every part of him. "You are more than they think, aren't you?" she said quietly. June kept his face neutral, but inside he was surprised. Was she starting to see him as more than just an animal? That night, June tried to look at the other human again. It was a woman with short black hair. She sat in her cage, staring at nothing. She looked thin and tired. June tapped on the glass to get her attention. After a moment, she looked up. Their eyes met across the room. She did not react. She just looked back down. June frowned. How long had she been here? Had she given up hope? He would not give up, and he would not leave her behind when he escaped. 1 week passed. June learned more about his cage each day. The entertainment device Nara had given him was simple but useful. At night, when the lights dimmed, he took it apart carefully. Inside were small parts he could use. His neural implant was changing. Each time Nara used her wrist device near his cage, the implant captured signals. Slowly, it was learning to speak to the alien technology. One night, Jun placed his hand on the wall near the small control panel that opened his food tray. He focused his thoughts through his implant. At first, nothing happened. Then, on his third try, the panel blinked once. Yes, Jun whispered. It was working. It took 3 more nights before he could make the food tray open by himself. It was a small victory, but important. If he could control this, he might control other systems too. Jun also watched the woman in the other cage. Her name, he learned from listening to Nara, was Su-bin. She had been captured 2 years ago. Nara called her the Broken One. She rarely moved and never responded to Nara's tests anymore. During the day, Jun continued to play his part. He learned the words Nara taught him. He performed the tests. He acted pleased when she gave him rewards. Nara seemed happy with his progress. Subject continues to exceed expectations, she said into her recording device. Learning speed is 3 times faster than previous human specimens. When Jun was sure Nara had left for the night, he tried something new. He focused on the control panel for the lights in his cage. His implant sent out signals, feeling for a connection. The lights flickered slightly. He tried again. This time, the lights dimmed, then brightened. Jun smiled. He had control of the lights. He made them blink in a pattern. On, off, on, off. Then he looked across the room at Su-bin's cage. To his surprise, she was watching. Her eyes were fixed on the blinking lights. Jun tried a simple pattern. 3 short blinks, 3 long blinks, 3 short blinks. An old Earth distress signal. SOS. Su-bin sat up slowly. She moved to her control panel and placed her hand on it. Nothing happened at first. Then her lights blinked once. She was trying to answer, but she had no implant to help her control the systems. Jun thought quickly. He looked at his entertainment device. He had taken it apart and learned how it worked. Maybe he could use it to boost his implant's signal. He worked through the night, connecting parts from the device to create a small transmitter. He placed it against the wall of his cage and channeled his implant's signal through it. This time, he didn't aim for his own systems. He sent the signal towards Su-bin's cage. Her lights flickered. He sent the signal again, stronger this time. Her lights dimmed, then came back on. Su-bin stood up, looking around in confusion. Then she seemed to understand. She moved her hand near her light panel, and the lights blinked once. Jun sent a pattern. 1 blink, pause, 2 blinks. Simple communication. Su-bin responded with the same pattern. 1 blink, pause, 2 blinks. They had made contact. Over the next few days, they developed a simple code. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Patterns of 3 for questions. Patterns of 4 for answers. Through this slow, careful method, they shared information. Su-bin had been a scientist on an Earth exploration mission. She knew about the Quan Empire. They believed they were the most advanced beings in the galaxy. They collected specimens from lesser species to study. Most importantly, she knew about the research facility. It was on a space station orbiting a Quan colony planet. There were ships in a hangar on the lower level. Jun sent a 4-blink pattern that meant, "We will escape." Su-bin looked at him for a long time. Then she sent back 1 blink. Yes. Hope had returned to her eyes. Nara noticed changes in Jun's behavior. He seemed to know what she wanted before she asked. When she brought new tests, he was ready for them. When she entered the room, he would be sitting near the front of his cage, waiting. One morning, she found that he had arranged his sleeping mat, food tray, and entertainment device in a pattern that looked like the symbol of her research division. It was too perfect to be an accident. "How did you know to do this?" she asked, forgetting that he shouldn't understand such a complex question. Jun just smiled at her. Nara felt something strange, a feeling she had never had about a research subject before. Curiosity mixed with something else, something that made her 6 eyes blink rapidly. Dr. Min visited again that day. He watched as Nara ran Jun through a series of tests. "You give this specimen too much attention," Dr. Min said. The Science Council wants results from all subjects, not just your favorite. He shows the most promise, Nera replied. Look at how he solves this puzzle. June was arranging shapes on a screen to create a complex pattern. He did it quickly, but not too quickly. He had learned to hide his true abilities. The council meeting is in 10 days, Dr. Min said. You will present your findings then. Make sure they are proper scientific observations, not the fond notes of a pet owner. After Dr. Min left, Nera stayed late in the lab. She watched June when he thought no one was looking. He seemed to be concentrating on something near the light panel. The next morning, June did not get up when Nera entered. He lay on his sleeping mat, shaking. His skin was hot and red. Nera felt that strange feeling again, stronger now. She was worried about him. Medical scan, she ordered her system. A beam of light passed over June's body. Subject has infection. Temperature dangerously high for human physiology. Immediate treatment recommended. Nera hesitated. Protocol said that 6 specimens should be allowed to recover on their own or be terminated if recovery was unlikely. Intervention was not permitted. It might affect research results. But June was different. His intelligence, his quick learning, he was her most important subject. That was the only reason she cared, she told herself. Nera overrode the security system and entered June's cage. She injected him with Quan medicine that would fight the infection. She placed a cooling pad under his head. You will recover, she said softly. June opened his eyes slightly. Thank you, he whispered. Nera froze. Those words were not part of the vocabulary she had taught him, and his pronunciation was too good, too natural. She should report this, but instead she just nodded and left the cage. For 3 days, Nera tended to June, bringing better food and medicine. She told no one about his strange words. She recorded no data during this time. When June recovered, something had changed between them. Nera no longer spoke about him as just a specimen. She talked to him directly, as if he could understand everything. And one day when they were alone, she asked him, How long have you understood our language? June looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke in perfect Kwanese. Since the beginning. Nera's skin changed colors rapidly. This is impossible. How? Humans are more than what you think we are, June said. I must report this to the council, Nera said, but she made no move to do so. Why haven't you already? June asked. Nera had no answer. She knew what she should do. Report the anomaly. Turn the human over for deeper study. But each time she thought about other scientists cutting into June's brain to find out how he learned their language, she felt sick. I will return tomorrow, she said, and left quickly. That night, June and Su Bin blinked messages faster than ever before. She knows I can understand them, June signaled. Dangerous, Su Bin replied. Maybe not, June answered. I think she cares what happens to me. Can you trust her? I don't know, but we might need her help to escape. Across the room, Su Bin's lights blinked once. The day of the Science Council meeting arrived. Nera had not reported June's ability to speak Kwanese. She had not told anyone that he was far more intelligent than they believed. She did not understand why she kept his secret. The main lab was filled with important Quan scientists. Dr. Min stood tall at the front of the room. Nera stood beside him, trying to look confident. Today, senior researcher Nera will show us her work with the human specimens, Dr. Min announced. The council will then decide if this research is worthy of continued funding. Nera stepped forward. Thank you, Dr. Min. Today I will demonstrate the learning capabilities of human specimens. This one, she pointed to June's cage, has shown exceptional progress. The glass walls of June's cage turned clear so everyone could see him. June sat calmly, watching the crowd of aliens. Subject will now demonstrate basic language skills and problem-solving abilities, Nera said. She sent the first test to the screen in June's cage. It was a simple matching game. June had completed much harder tests before. He knew what to do. But a plan had formed in his mind. This was his chance. He looked at the screen and deliberately made a mistake. The wrong answer flashed red. Nera blinked in surprise. "Try again," she said. June made another obvious mistake. Whispers spread through the crowd. Dr. Min looked pleased at Nera's failure. "Perhaps the specimen is not as advanced as you claimed," he said. Nera's skin darkened with embarrassment. "I don't understand. He has done this perfectly many times." June stood up. He walked to the front of his cage and looked directly at the council members. Then he spoke in perfect Guanese. "I apologize for the poor performance," he said clearly. "I find it difficult to concentrate with so many observers." The room fell silent. Every alien stared at him in shock. "Did it just?" One council member started. "Impossible," another shouted. Nera looked as surprised as everyone else. She had not expected June to reveal his ability so publicly. Dr. Min turned to Nera. "You taught it our language. This breaks every protocol." "I did not teach him," Nera said. "He learned on his own." "Lies," Dr. Min hissed. "No lower species could learn our complex language without direct teaching." June spoke again. "Your assumption that humans are a lower species is your first mistake." The council members moved back from the cage in fear and surprise. "This specimen must be examined immediately," the head council member said. "Its brain must be studied to understand this anomaly." "You mean cut open," June said calmly. "That would be your second mistake." Nera stepped between the council and June's cage. "This subject is part of my extended research program. I have been documenting his language acquisition as part of a special study." She was lying to protect him. June realized she had made her choice. She had chosen him over her own people's rules. Dr. Min was not fooled. "You have broken the most basic rule of specimen research. You have formed an attachment to it. This creature must be terminated and studied." "No," Nera said, too quickly. "Think of what we can learn from a living subject that can communicate with us. This is a scientific breakthrough." The council whispered among themselves. Finally, the head member spoke. "The human will be moved to the secure research sector. It will be studied by a team, not just researcher Nera. If it shows any sign of danger, it will be terminated immediately." As the council members filed out, Dr. Min stayed behind. He came close to Nera. "You have ruined your career for this creature," he said. "And you have potentially put our entire research station at risk." When everyone had gone, Nera approached June's cage. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Now they will take you away." "It was time," June said. "I need you to help us escape." "Us?" Nera asked. June nodded toward Subin's cage. "Both of us. Tonight." Nera looked torn. "They will know I helped you." "Then come with us," June said. "You already chose a side when you protected me from the council." Nera's 6 eyes blinked in sequence as she considered her options. Her whole life had been dedicated to science and her people. But something had changed. "How can I help?" she finally asked. That night, most of the research station was empty. The council members had gone to a special dinner to discuss the day's surprising events. This was their chance. Nera entered the lab carrying a large case. She looked nervous, her skin changing colors rapidly. "I brought what you asked for," she said as she approached June's cage. June nodded. "Good. Open the cage." Nera hesitated. "If we are caught, all of us will be punished severely. If we stay, they will cut open my brain tomorrow," June said simply. Nera placed her hand on the control panel. The glass wall slid open. For the first time in weeks, June stepped out of his cage. He stretched his arms and legs, enjoying the freedom. "Now, Subin," he said. They'd walked across the lab to the other cage. Subin stood waiting, her eyes wide with hope and fear. When her cage opened, she stepped out slowly, as if she couldn't believe it was real. "Thank you," she said to Nera in careful Guanese. She had been listening and learning from June's light signals. Nara looked surprised that both humans could speak her language. "We must hurry," she said. "Security checks this sector every 30 time units." She opened the case she had brought. Inside were 2 Quan worker uniforms and a datapad. "Put these on," she said. "If anyone sees you from a distance, they might think you are young Quan workers." As they changed into the uniforms, June asked Nara about the station layout. "We are on level 5, Nara explained, showing them a map on the datapad. "The ship hangar is on level 2. We must take the transport tube down 3 levels." "Will there be guards?" Su Bin asked. "Yes, but not many tonight. Most security is at the council dinner." June looked at the map carefully. "And this area?" he asked, pointing to a section marked with special symbols. "The Central Computer Core," Nara said. "It controls all systems on the station, but it is always heavily guarded." June smiled. "We need to go there first." "That is too dangerous," Nara protested. "Trust me," June said. He touched his head. "My neural implant can connect to your systems. If I can access the central computer, I can help us escape." Nara didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "This way." They left the lab and entered a long hallway. It was much larger than the human cages, built for the tall Quan people. June and Su Bin had to walk quickly to keep up with Nara's long steps. They reached the transport tube without seeing anyone. Nara pressed her hand to the control panel. The doors opened. Just as they were about to enter, they heard voices. 2 Quan security officers were coming around the corner. "Hide," Nara whispered, but there was nowhere to go in the empty hallway. June touched his head where the implant was. He focused his thoughts on the transport tube controls. His implants sent out a signal. The lights in the hallway flickered, then went out. Only emergency lights remained, casting red shadows. "System failure in Section 5C, announced a computer voice. "Security personnel report to control room." The 2 guards looked at each other, then hurried away toward the control room. "How did you do that?" Nara asked, amazed. "I told you. My implant can connect to your systems," Jun said, "but it only works at short range. I need to reach the central computer to do more." They entered the transport tube. Nara entered a code, and the tube began to move downward. "The computer core is protected by 3 security checkpoints," Nara said. "We cannot get past them all without being caught." June looked at Su Bin. She nodded slightly. "We might not need to pass all checkpoints," Jun said. "Just get me close enough for my implant to connect." The transport tube stopped at level 3. When the doors opened, they saw a large room filled with blinking lights and humming machines. The central computer core. And standing in front of it was Dr. Min. He turned and saw them. His eyes widened in shock. "Nara, what are you doing with the specimens outside containment?" he asked. Then understanding dawned on his face. "You are helping them escape." He reached for the alarm button on the wall. June closed his eyes and focused all his energy through his implant. He reached out to the nearest computer terminal. Just before Dr. Min's hand hit the alarm, all the lights went out. In the darkness, they heard Dr. Min stumble. Emergency lights came on, bathing the room in dim red light. "Security breach in computer core," Dr. Min shouted, hoping the system would still respond to voice commands. Nara moved quickly. She grabbed Dr. Min's arm and pulled him away from the control panel. "Please stop," she said. "No one needs to get hurt." Dr. Min's eyes showed his anger. "You have betrayed your own kind for these animals." "They are not animals," Nara said. "They are intelligent beings like us." While they argued, Jun rushed to the main computer terminal. He placed his hands on the control surface and closed his eyes. His neural implant connected to the system, sending out pulses of energy that the computer recognized. Lines of code flashed across the screen. Jun's mind raced through the Quan computer systems. He found security protocols, door controls, and navigation maps. Amazing. Su-bin whispered as she watched Jun work. Dr. Min broke free from Nara's grip. He lunged for a weapon on the wall. It was a stun rod, used for controlling dangerous specimens. "Stop," Nara shouted. But Dr. Min grabbed the rod and turned to face them. "I will not let you ruin everything we have built." He swung the rod at Jun. Su-bin jumped forward and pushed Jun aside. The rod hit the computer terminal instead, sending sparks flying. Alarms began to blare throughout the station. Red lights flashed. "Security breach. All personnel to emergency stations," the computer announced. "Now you have done it," Nara said to Dr. Min. "The safety systems will lock down the entire station." Metal doors began to close automatically, sealing off different sections of the station. "We need to go," Su-bin urged. But Jun didn't move. He was still connected to the terminal, his eyes closed in concentration. "Almost there," he said. "I'm downloading the station schematics and security codes." Dr. Min raised the stun rod again. This time, Nara blocked his attack. She grabbed the rod, and they struggled for control. "Go," she shouted to the humans. "I will hold him off." Jun finally opened his eyes. "Done," he said. "And I'd lock down the upper levels. Security can't reach us for a few minutes." He turned to help Nara, but Dr. Min had pushed her against the wall. The stun rod was inches from her face, crackling with energy. Jun focused his mind through his implant again. This time, he targeted the stun rod itself. The weapon suddenly sparked and went dead in Dr. Min's hands. "What?" Dr. Min looked at the rod in confusion. Jun stepped forward. "You should not have done that." Dr. Min backed away, suddenly afraid. "What are you?" "I am what you refused to see," Jun said. "A being equal to you in every way. And in some ways, more." Mechanical noises filled the room. 5 security robots entered, their optical sensors scanning the area. "Threat detected," they announced in unison. "Surrender or be neutralized." Nara looked at Jun in fear. "We cannot fight them all." Jun smiled calmly. He touched his head where the implant was. "They don't serve the Quan anymore. They serve me now." The robots turned to Dr. Min. "Threat located. Please remain still." Dr. Min's eyes widened in shock. "This is impossible. No species has ever been able to override our security systems." "First time for everything," Jun said. He turned to the others. "We need to move quickly. The ship hangar is on level 2. They left Dr. Min surrounded by the robots and ran to the transport tube. Jun used his new connection to the station's systems to call the tube and override the lockdown. As they descended to level 2, Nara looked at Jun with a mixture of fear and wonder. "How are you doing this?" she asked. "Even our best scientists cannot control systems so easily." "My implant has merged with your technology," Jun explained. "It's like they were made for each other." The transport tube stopped at level 2. The doors opened to reveal the ship hangar. It was a vast room filled with vessels of various sizes. "We need that one," Nara said, pointing to a small ship near the exit bay. "It's fast and can travel between star systems." As they ran toward the ship, alarms continued to blare. In the distance, they heard shouts and heavy footsteps. "They're coming," Su-bin said. Jun touched his head again. "Let them come. They'll find that their weapons don't work anymore." Nara looked at him with growing concern. The human she once thought was a simple pet had become something else entirely. Something powerful. Something dangerous. They reached the ship just as security forces burst into the hangar. 20 Quan soldiers armed with energy weapons rushed toward them. "Stop, or we will fire," the lead soldier shouted. Jun turned to face them. His eyes had a strange glow now. The connection between his implant and the Quan technology was changing him. "Get on the ship," he told Nara and Su-bin. "I need a moment." Su-bin grabbed Nara's arm and pulled her up the ship's ramp. Nara couldn't take her eyes off Jun as he stood alone against 20 armed soldiers. The soldiers raised their weapons. The leader gave the order to fire. Nothing happened. Their weapons did not work. June smiled. Your technology answers to me now. The soldiers looked at their useless weapons in confusion. Then they charged at June with their bare hands. June closed his eyes. The hangar doors began to open and close randomly. Cargo containers moved by themselves, blocking the soldiers' path. The lights flickered on and off. What is happening? The soldiers shouted in fear. Inside the ship, Nara watched through the view screen. His implant must have fully merged with our systems, she said, her voice shaking. He can control anything connected to the station network. Su Bin started preparing the ship for launch. June always had a military-grade neural implant, but I've never seen it do anything like this. Outside, June walked calmly toward the ship as chaos surrounded him. His steps were steady and confident. The soldiers who got too close suddenly found their armor locking up, freezing them in place. When June reached the ship, he turned back to look at the hangar. With a thought, he shut down the artificial gravity in that section. The soldiers floated helplessly in the air, unable to reach him. Let's go, he said as he entered the ship. Nara stared at him. This was not the same being she had kept in a cage. He seemed taller, more powerful. Even his eyes looked different. There were strange patterns of light moving across them. What has happened to you? She asked. Evolution, Jun replied. My implant has absorbed your technology. I am becoming something new. He sat at the control panel. Instead of pressing buttons, he simply placed his hand on the surface. The ship came to life immediately. I'd disable the hangar security systems, he said. We can leave now. The ship lifted off the floor. The exit bay doors opened ahead of them. Freedom was close. Suddenly, a voice came through the communication system. It was the head council member. Researcher Nara, return the specimens immediately. This is your final warning. June touched the communication panel. We are not specimens, he said coldly. We are not pets. We are not yours to cage. With those words, he launched the ship forward. They shot through the exit bay doors into the darkness of space. Alarms blared in the ship. 3 Quan patrol vessels were pursuing them. They're faster than us, Nara said, looking at the scanner. They will catch us before we can reach jump distance. June's expression remained calm. He placed both hands on the control panel and closed his eyes. His entire body seemed to glow slightly. The ship's systems began to change. Displays showed power levels rising far beyond normal limits. What are you doing? Su Bin asked, watching in amazement. Improving the ship, Jun said. His voice sounded different, with a slight mechanical echo. The Quan technology is remarkable, but inefficient. I can make it better. The engines roared with new power. Their speed doubled, then tripled. The pursuing ships fell behind rapidly. Nara watched June with growing fear. The human she had captured was transforming before her eyes into something she didn't understand. Something that could control her people's most advanced technology with just a thought. You've become, she whispered. What? June asked, turning to look at her. His eyes now shimmered with streams of data and light. A monster, she said softly. June looked at his reflection in a dark screen. For a moment, he seemed surprised by what he saw. Perhaps, he said, but remember, Nara, you created this monster when you put me in a cage. Their ship flew through space faster than any Quan vessel had ever traveled. The patrol ships were far behind now, unable to keep up with June's enhanced engines. Inside the ship, Su Bin checked their course on the navigation system. We're heading toward Earth, she said, but it will still take months to get there. June stood at the center of the control room. Light patterns moved across his skin, pulsing with the rhythm of the ship's engines. He was changing more with each hour. I can make it faster, he said. His voice carried strange echoes, as if multiple voices spoke at once. Nara watched him from the corner of the room. She had seen many remarkable things as a scientist, but nothing like this, a being evolving before her eyes, merging with technology in a way her people had never imagined possible. "What will you do when you reach Earth?" she asked. June turned to look at her. His eyes now glowed with streams of data flowing across them. "Warn them," he said. "The Quan have taken other humans. They must be prepared." "And then," she pressed, "will you use your new powers against my people? Will you seek revenge for what was done to you?" The question hung in the air. Su Bin looked up from the navigation controls, also waiting for his answer. June walked to the large view screen showing the stars outside. For a long moment, he said nothing. "I could," he finally said. "With what I've become, I could return to your world. I could take control of every system. Shut down your defenses. Open all the cages." He raised his hand, and the ship's systems responded instantly, displays changing to show Quan military installations. "I have all the information I need. Your research stations, your home planet, your defense codes. I could destroy everything you've built." Nara's skin darkened with fear. "You would kill billions of innocent Quan who never harmed you. Isn't that what powerful species do to those they consider lesser?" June asked, his voice cold. "Isn't that what the Quan would do?" Nara had no answer. She knew he was right. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. The main screen showed a massive Quan battleship approaching from a different direction. It was many times larger than their small vessel. "They sent the command ship," Nara said. "It's the most powerful vessel in the Quan fleet." A transmission came through. The head council member appeared on screen. "Return the specimens and the traitor Nara immediately," he demanded, "or we will destroy your ship." June smiled. It was not a kind smile. He raised his hand again. The command ship's weapons powered down. Its engines stopped. Every system went dark. "I could destroy you all," June said to the head council member. "I could turn your most powerful ship into nothing but floating metal." Fear showed on the alien's face. "What do you want?" "I want you to remember this moment," June said, "when a lesser being held your life in his hands, when the pet you caged became the monster you feared." Then June did something unexpected. He restored power to the command ship's life support and communication systems, but left the weapons and engines disabled. "I am not like you," he said. "I will not destroy what I do not understand. I will not cage what I fear." He turned to Nara. "That is the difference between us." Nara stepped forward. "What about me? Will you take me back to face punishment?" June's expression softened slightly. "You helped us escape. You chose to see us as equals. You have a place with us if you want it. And the other humans your people have taken?" Su Bin asked. "We will find them," June promised. "All of them." He turned back to the head council member on the screen. "This is your only warning. Release all human captives. Stay away from Earth and its colonies. If we find another human in a Quan cage, we will return. And next time, I will not be merciful." With that, he cut the transmission. Their ship's engines flared with new energy. They shot forward, leaving the command ship behind. As Earth's star appeared in the distance, June looked at his hands. The glowing patterns were fading. He was regaining control of the transformation. "Are you still human?" Nara asked quietly. June smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "I am what I choose to be," he said, "not what others cage me as."